Gisella, Hungary's first queen. Most people interested in Hungary's history know about King St. Stephen, and I've already made a video about him. He was Hungary's first Christian king and the first Hungarian ruler recognised by European rulers. Crowned by Pope Sylvester II with Emperor Otto III's consent at the end of 1000 Common Era or the start of 1001. But it is doubtful he would have made such an impact without his wife, Gisela, Hungary's first queen. This video is about Gisela, Gisela of Bavaria, pious Gisela in Hungarian, Blessed Gisela, Bulldog Gisela, Gisela Leodolf. Let's start with that last name, Gisela Leodolf. She was born into Bavarian royalty as part of the Leodolf dynasty. She was the great-granddaughter of Otto the Great. Gisela, let's go back to the English, was born in Bad Abbach in Bavaria about 985. Before she was born, her father, Duke Henry, who was known as the Quarrelsome, Duke Henry of Bavaria, waged war against Prince Geza of Hungary, and that was Stephen's father. Peace was achieved in 973, before Gisela and possibly Stephen was even born. Gisela's mother was Duchess Gisela of Burgundy, again royalty, and her brother would become Henry II, the Holy Roman Emperor. Gisela was raised very devout, and like many noble girls of the time, was well educated in the Christian faith and a wide breadth of knowledge in more worldly matters. She was educated in Regensburg Monastery and may have even been a student of the scholar and bishop Wolfgang von Regensburg. It was said she wished to enter the convent from an early age, but was persuaded she had a greater role for God. In 995, when Gisela was about 10 years old, she was used to cement the alliance between the German Empire and Hungary by being pledged to marry Stephen, who by then was at least 20 years old, maybe almost 30. A year later, at 11, Gisela and Stephen were wed at the Cathedral of Cologne. Then on Christmas 1000, or possibly New Year's Day 1001, she and her husband were crowned together as Hungarian monarchs. They had several children, but they're not well documented by name. Two that we know of were named after Gisela's family. One son was called Emmerich. Now that is actually a variation of Henry, or Imre in Hungarian. Another son was named Otto. Of all the children, only Imre made it to adulthood. He was killed in a hunting accident in his early 20s. A man so devout, he never consummated his own marriage, and so Gisela and Stephen's line was snuffed out. However, Gisela did have a lasting influence on Hungary. Gisela arrived in Hungary with a large retinue of German priests, knights and nobles. These would play a leading role in Stephen's court and set the precedent for other Arpad kings, leading to the encouragement of German settlements within Hungary's borders. And Stephen made good use of the German knights in battle, using them in war soon after his marriage against Kopány, following Stephen's father Geza's death, that is, before he was king. It was said that Hungarians created the state, Germans the town. The Germans received a mixed reaction from Hungary's nobles. What others thought was not considered important, and that included some mistrust. But Gisela herself was bilingual in German and Hungarian, and probably a few other languages, and acted as a bridge between the two cultures. The Hungarian court at the time resided mostly in Esztergom and Székesfehérvár, and was heavily influenced by Gisela and her own German court. Official history remembers her as pious, and not only did she have a strong influence in spreading Western culture in Hungary, but also the Christian faith. that job from God that she was told about. Gisella's entire life was characterized by a profound spirit of charity and devotion to others. In addition, she had the capacity for constant, tireless work. Alongside Stephen, she was the patron of the Catholic Church and commissioned the construction of churches and castles. Gisela founded Hungary's first bishopric in Veszprém. Stephen gives her credit for beginning from the foundations with every necessary thing for the service of God in gold and silver and a multiplicity of vestments. There is documentation from 1232 which mentions her as the founder of the cathedral. Apparently there's still a memorial plaque erected in her honour in Veszprém, which dates to around 1503. However, I've not been able to find a photo of it. With her donations, Gisela supported the Archdiocese of Veszprém, the Provostship of Fehérvár, and the Benedictine Abbey in Csonad, and, in all likelihood, the foundation of the monastery and Bokombale can also be connected to her. And she was involved in more stereotypical feminine activities. She established a craft workshop in Veszprém for the production of liturgical textiles. She is said to have been responsible for the chasuble, which later became the Hungarian coronation robe. To be clear, how much she sewed with her own hands is unknown. Her Hungarian and Bavarian ladies-in-waiting, as well as the nuns of Veszprém convent, did much of the embroidery. An image on the robe shows the Queen Consort holding a church in her hands, from which many have concluded that she was the founder of Székesfehérvár's cathedral, but more likely King Stephen gave the city and its bishopric to his wife as a pledge of his faith. An alternative portrayal. I did say official history, which means there's an alternative story. Among Stephen's less celebrated acts was his brutal and cruel treatment of his relatives, who not only stood to inherit the throne, but remained true to the Magyar's pagan shamanistic past or embraced Eastern Orthodoxy, which was also considered pagan. These acts range from exile to blinding to burying alive. But according to at least one chronicle, the blinding of Vassal was down to Queen Gisella, who wanted her own relative Peter to inherit the throne. Research suggests the tradition portraying Gisela as a pious queen may be closer to historical reality. So why the hatchet job? Several explanations arise. One is a genuine dislike of Gisela by the Hungarian tribal leaders, who are being pushed out of power and their religion persecuted. The nickname Bajor Gisela is not entirely positive. Another is that Gisela's narrative is merged with the story of another German queen, Gertrude. Yet another is that the retelling sought to rehabilitate Stephen. This could have been done to clear the way for his canonization. And yet another possibility is the chronicler may have sought to legitimize the power of the kings of the vassal line by portraying it as though Stephen had wished to see his uncle, and subsequently his descendants, on the throne after his death. I found a paper of this in Hungarian and I've linked it in the description. So what happens to Gisela after Stephen's death in 1038? If she had really plotted to get Peter onto the throne, he was not grateful. Peter treated Gisela badly. He forcibly took her estates that she had received from her husband during her lifetime, as well as the money she had at her disposal, and compelled her to swear an oath that in future she would not give anything to anyone without his permission. He confined her to her castle and surrounded her with guards, so she had no opportunity to go anywhere, nor did anyone arriving there have the opportunity to meet her. Close quotes. She left Hungary in 1045 at the latest, with the German Emperor Henry III after his visit to Hungary. No, Henry III was a distant relative. She lived in Nienborg, in a Benedictine women's monastery located in Possel, where she became the abbess and died around 1060. The centre of the Gisella cult from the 14th and 15th centuries has been centred around her tomb preserved in the Neonborg convent in Posel. Her canonisation was attempted in the 18th century but failed, but she was declared blessed, that is, she was beatified, in 1975. Her day is the 7th of May, which is traditionally the day of her death. While Stephen's relics include his right hand kept in Budapest, Gisela has an upper arm bone in Veszprém. So there it is, the story of a Bavarian princess who becomes a child bride and has enormous influence on the direction of a foreign kingdom. After her husband's death, she is disinherited and eventually flees to become one of the most famous 11th century abbesses. Gisella, first Queen of Hungary.